Oh. Okay. One? Just one. Just one? Just one. What is wrong with me? Quick question. No. I got two questions. You home alone, right? And you sneeze. You know for a fact, you 100% you home alone. You sneeze. Somebody say, bless you. What you doing? Or you home alone and you throw like, I don't know. You throw something small. For some reason, you throw like some toilet paper, just cause. And somebody say, ouch. As clear as day, you heard somebody say, thank you. Bless you when you sneeze, but nobody's there. Or as clear as day, you hear somebody say, ouch, when you throw like a piece of paper, toilet paper. What you doing? Let me know. Sup, hoes. I did not mean to say hoes. Sup. Well, I already said it. Sup, though.
Today, I'm going to tell you a strange, dark, and mysterious medical mystery. And it actually happened really recently, and it's totally insane. There is not another...
Shit! Popcorn is so dangerous. I probably had like 2, maybe 3 individual popcorns that I just threw in my mouth. And something just hit like the back of my throat. Jesus.
Story I've covered that sounds anything like this. And so if you're a fan of medical mysteries like today's story, keep in mind, we actually have an entire show dedicated to medical mysteries. It's called Mr. Ballin's Medical Mysteries. It's a podcast, and it's available on all podcast platforms right now for free. But before we get into this medical mystery episode, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and reverse all their doorknobs so they turn the wrong way.
Hell no!
Please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's medical mystery.
Ha! 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 Dice roll! Dice roll!
On the evening of June 7th, 2023, a 36-year-old man named Umar Abdullah...
He's in cahoots. He a club ass.
walked into his bedroom in Tampa Bay, Florida, and right away he opened up all the windows. Now, keep in mind, Tampa Bay, Florida is really hot. And so by doing this, he was letting in all this really hot air. But Umar did not care. He just wanted whatever was inside of his apartment out. Umar, along with his wife Samira and their 10-month-old daughter, had just gotten back to their apartment after a trip to Ohio, and the second they walked inside, they had smelled this weird smell. And it was something they had never smelled before. This was not like rotten food or anything like that.
I would have instantly smelled that, whatever it was, out of the ordinary, just weird smell. I would have smelled that, walk right back out, call the police, tell them go check it out. And I would have watched from 6 miles away with my Adidas binoculars. Do people still use binoculars? Let me know.
It was like a chemical smell, but even that wasn't a good description. It was like a cross between chemicals and maybe paint. And so at first, Umar and Samira just walked around their apartment, predominantly in the kitchen, looking for things that could be leaking, in the fridge or in cupboards or whatever, but they couldn't find anything that seemed like it could be the cause of the smell. And it was around this point, when they were totally stumped, that Umar and Samira remembered that their apartment building was extremely well taken care of. Like, repairs were done immediately and all the time in every single unit, and the fact...
That sounds so lovely. That sounds lovely. I remember when I was living in an apartment, I was living in the hood. You know how long it took so long for anybody to come look at any problem. Jesus Christ.
That they had been away in Ohio had been known to their apartment manager. And so they thought, maybe while they were gone, maybe somebody had come in here and maybe touched up some paint or made some repairs or something, even though it seemed a bit weird that they hadn't been informed beforehand that, painting or repairs were going to take place in their apartment. But ultimately, that's what they chalked it up to. And so it was at this point that Umar and Samira walked all around the apartment, opening up all the windows, and Samira also lit a candle as well. And pretty soon that weird smell disappeared, and both the parents just kind of forgot about it. And so Umar grabbed all their luggage from their trip and began unpacking it into the drawers and putting toiletries away. And at the same time, Samira put their baby in a high chair in the kitchen, and then Samira began preparing dinner. And a few minutes later, as Umar was still putting things away, he heard Samira calling from the kitchen to, hey, come out here for a second. And so Umar stopped what he was doing, he went into the kitchen, and he looked at Samira, and she was looking very concerned down at their daughter. And their daughter was in her high chair, and her dinner was right in front of her, but she wasn't eating. And their daughter seemed really fussy. And normally, their daughter was such a get-along kid who never fussed, who always ate her food.
Is that an Adidas hat? With an Adidas shirt? I really hope he got that whole fit on.
And so this seemed really out of character. And so both parents kind of stared at the daughter for a second, and then Umar was like, you know what, all the windows are still open and it's getting pretty hot in here. Maybe the baby's just fussy about the heat. And so Samira agreed that could totally be it. And so the parents went around the apartment, closing down all the windows, allowing the air conditioning to kick back on and cool the apartment down. But about an hour later, after the apartment had cooled back down, the baby was still very fussy. And at this point, Umar and Samira were trying to put the baby to bed, and they were really struggling with that. And also, in addition to the baby obviously not feeling very well, Umar and Samira both began to complain that they had headaches. And so at this point, the parents assumed that, you know what, all of this, the baby's behavior and now our headaches must be tied to just the travel we just went through, and we just need a day to recover here. And so they kind of rushed their baby through her bedtime routine and eventually got her down. And then Umar and Samira took some ibuprofen to help with their headaches. And then they too climbed in bed and drifted off to sleep, hoping that when they woke up, everybody would feel better again. But the next morning, nobody was better. In fact, everybody was doing worse. Umar's headache had now gotten much stronger, and Samira, she still had a headache, but also was very lethargic, and the baby was still very fussy. And over the next few days, their symptoms continued to get worse and worse. Umar's headache went from really bad to pretty much blinding, like he couldn't do anything else but think about his headache. And Samira basically had to lay down all day. It was like no matter how much she slept, she had zero energy, and their poor baby just continued to cry and fuss all the time, and even began to vomit. And so it seemed pretty obvious by this point, after a few days, that the three of them must have caught some sort of bug while they were traveling. That this was not just jet lag, that they actually had some sort of...
Speaking about catching bugs while traveling, I heard smallpox is back in town in America, in California. That was fast as shit.
Illness. But the parents were convinced that, they could just kind of rough it out, and eventually, after a couple of days, they would get better. But on the morning of June 14th, so this is now a week after coming back home from their trip, not only were all their symptoms still really bad, but on this particular morning, things took a dark turn. That morning, when Umar went to his daughter's bedroom, he's still dealing with this horrible headache, he makes his way into the bedroom, and he goes down to pick his daughter up from her crib, and as he's reaching down to grab her, he freezes. Because on the bed, on the pillow, right behind the baby, is all the baby's hair. The baby had clearly lost huge chunks of her hair. And so Umar at this point forgot about his headache and yelled for Samira, and even though she's super lethargic, she could tell this is an emergency, so she got up and made her way into the bedroom, and she looked down too and saw all the hair, and she reached down and scooped the baby up, and she turned the baby over, and sure enough, there was a huge bald spot on the back of their baby's head.
Damn.
But Umar and Samira, they said to each other right away that, wait a minute, I know this is scary, but it is actually a thing that newborn babies sometimes do lose their hair.
They should have used Shea Moisture. Adidas sponsor.
But when they went online and looked at the age range of when that's kind of a common thing to happen, it was pretty obvious that their baby, being 10 months old, was a little bit too old for losing her hair to be considered a normal thing. And so Umar and Samira sat there and continued Googling, what could this be? My 10-month-old baby is losing her hair. And there were lots of explanations ranging from, ringworm to some severe infection to some rare genetic disorder. And all of it was kind of terrifying. And also none of it really lined up with what they were seeing with their daughter. And so the parents were like, you know what? Clearly we don't know what this is. We've all been sick for a week. We have to bring our babies to the doctor. And so as Samira got on the phone and called the baby's doctor, Umar hopped in the shower to get ready to go to the doctor. And as soon as he began shampooing his hair, he noticed clumps of hair were falling out. And so all of a sudden it dawned on him that whatever's going on with his baby is going on with him, and very likely
keep that shit in the house. I don't know if it's contagious. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't care.
On with his wife too. And it was at this point too that Umar remembered that strange smell when they first walked into their apartment after coming back from their trip. Now, they had opened up all the windows and lit candles, and, the smell had kind of dissipated, and then they had shut the windows again, and they hadn't smelled it again. And so Umar began thinking, wait a minute, maybe we've just gone nose blind to the smell, and maybe there's some sort of contamination in the air. Maybe there's a gas leak or something worse than that. And so as soon as Umar got out of the shower and told his wife about how he lost hair and kind of his theory that maybe there was some contamination in their apartment, Umar called his landlord and explained, the whole situation. And the landlord would tell Umar right off the top that, during the time they were in Ohio, nobody went inside their apartment. So there's no fresh paint in there. No maintenance was done. So whatever you smelled was not from us. And then the landlord said to Umar that, as scary as it sounds, it's possible that you might have like a gas leak inside of your apartment, or maybe you have a freon leak from your air conditioning system, or maybe there's toxic mold. But whatever it is, we're going to get people in there, we're going to find the issue and solve it. And so later that day, sure enough, a gas inspector showed up to Umar and Samira's apartment, and they checked the entire place, and they could not find any trace of a gas leak. They checked everywhere. There was no leak. But they did tell Umar and Samira that yes, we can smell a faint trace of some chemical smell, but we don't think it's gas. And then after the gas inspector left, the landlord went out and found a mold inspector who came into Umar and Samira's apartment. They looked everywhere and could not find any mold. Then the landlord brought in a plumber to check the hot water heater, but no issues with that. Then the landlord brought an HVAC company in, and they checked the air conditioning units, and there was no leak. And so finally, after the landlord had kind of run out of ideas for who to bring over to check the apartment, because again, by this point, nobody had found anything wrong with the apartment, Umar just said, you know what, I'm gonna call the fire department. And so Umar, he calls the fire department, and the fire department, they send over their hazardous materials team or their hazmat team. And so they go into the apartment and they look everywhere, and there is nothing. They could not find any source that was causing the smell at all. It seemed very much like their apartment was totally safe and fine. But by this point, it's now been 2 weeks since Umar, Samira, and their baby had come back from that trip, and they still felt totally horrible. Umar still had his headaches, he was still losing his hair. Samira had begun losing her hair as well. She still had her headaches, she still felt lethargic, and their baby was still losing her hair, and she still was fussy and miserable. And all three of them now had developed this weird shortness of breath where they'd just be walking through the apartment, and suddenly it was like they couldn't even breathe. And so now they've had all these people who can't find anything wrong with their apartment. They'd gone to their doctors, and the doctors had no idea what was wrong with them. And so it was kind of like they had no idea what to do, but clearly this crisis was only getting worse and worse and worse. And so Umar felt like he had no more options. He couldn't leave his apartment. He couldn't afford to do that. And so they were just stuck in this place that seemed toxic. But all that would change on June 25th, so 2.5 weeks after they came home from that trip. Because on this day, Umar discovered something about that chemical smell they caught right when they came back in after the trip. You know, the smell that all the people that had come into the apartment had sort of noticed but couldn't identify. On June 25th, Umar figured something out about that smell.
It was a neighbor.
If you don't know this, late last year, we launched a brand new, strange, dark, and mysterious show called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. And so far, people love it. It is a free weekly show where each week we explore a new baffling mystery originating from the one place we all can't escape, our own bodies. Topics discussed on the show range from obscure diseases and freak occurrences to totally weird medical mishaps that sometimes result in big, amazing discoveries. and other times result in just unimaginable suffering and death. So, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, then you really ought to give Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries a try. To start listening, go look up and follow Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries on any podcast platform, and boom, you're in. You got yourself a new weekly show. But if you're super impatient, like I am, and you can't wait a whole week to get a new episode, well, with your Prime membership, you can listen to an entire batch of 8 episodes at once, because we release them 8 at a time on Amazon Music. Also, on Amazon Music, there are no ads. And if all this was not enough to sell you on maybe giving this show a try, well, then stick around at the end of this video and I'll play you a sneak peek from our newest episode of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. Umar was in his apartment feeling completely miserable, as was his wife and his daughter who were in the bedroom. But at some point, Umar suddenly caught a whiff of that weird chemical smell. And as soon as he smelled it, he sort of began to cough, and he was about to call his landlord and be like, hey, I smelled it again. But he decided on this day, instead of calling anybody else, he was going to run an experiment of his own. And so instead of trying to get away from the smell, Umar began smelling in the air as deep as he could to try to kind of figure out where the smell was coming from. And so he began walking around his apartment, sniffing the air, kind of tracing the smell, and slowly but surely he began kind of following the smell through his kitchen, down the hallway, all the way to his front door. And when he got to his front door, he smelled it again, and you could tell the smell was the strongest right now. And so feeling a sudden jolt of adrenaline, he grabbed the door, flung it open, half expecting to see like a chemical cloud floating in the air in the hallway. But as soon as he opened the door, there was nothing outside. And when he smelled in the hallway, the smell wasn't really there anymore. And so he kind of looked around for a second, feeling kind of silly, and then he shut the door, and he was about to just go back into his apartment and just kind of accept that once again, I got no idea what's going on here. But then he stopped, and he turned back around and looked at the actual door, like the actual front door of his apartment. And he began smelling the door. And the door definitely had the chemical smell. And so he began smelling and tracing his hands all over this door, not even sure what he was looking for. But eventually he worked his way all the way to the bottom of the door. And that's when he felt something. And so suddenly Umar got down and stared at the strange thing he had found on his door. And as soon as he saw what it was, he jumped up and ran to his wife to tell her what he had just found. After talking with his wife about this thing, they came up with a plan. Late that night, Umar waited until the entire apartment complex seemed really quiet, and then as quietly as he could, he opened up that front door, he stepped out into the hallway, and then he made his way over to the big fake plant that stood at the end of this hallway that was kind of right outside, kind of adjacent to his door, and he hid something in the plant, and then Umar went back into his apartment and he shut the door. And on June 27th, so 2 days later, the moment Umar and Samira had been waiting for finally arrived. At around 5:30 p.m. that evening, suddenly that chemical smell began to emanate through the apartment, and their baby began coughing so badly she began vomiting. And so as Samira was tending to their baby, Umar very quietly opened up his front door, looked in the hallway, didn't see anyone, and he rushed over to that plant, and he took the thing he had hidden a couple of days before, and he went back into his apartment, shut the door, and went into his office. And when Umar came out of that office a little while later, Samira was waiting and she was looking at him. And as Umar came out, it was like he was totally ashen-faced. He looked completely shocked and he could barely speak. And Samira said, "What's going on? What did you learn?" And Umar said, "We have to get out of here right now. Get the baby. We have to leave right now. We're going to the hospital." And so as Samira bundled up their baby and they started getting their things together, Umar called 911 and told the operator what he had just discovered. The strange thing Umar had discovered on his front door 2 days earlier on June 25th was a weird crack at the very base of his door where you could basically see from inside of his apartment out into the hallway. And the thing Umar and his wife had decided to hide in the hallway in that plant was a video camera aimed at their front door because they were suspicious that something was making its way through that crack in the door into their apartment, and they wanted to catch it on camera. And that's exactly what happened 2 days later when around 5:30 p.m., their daughter began coughing and Umar began to smell that smell in the apartment, and he rushed out, he got his camera, he went back into his office, he watched the footage, and he could not believe what his camera had recorded.
Oh, I've seen this before. I don't know if I reacted to it, but yeah. Apparently they was making too much noise or something, but God.
just before 5:30 p.m. on June 25th. So right before the smell came into the apartment, on video, you see this guy walk up the stairs and enter the hallway right in front of Umar and Samira's apartment door. And this man had a syringe in his hand, and he knelt down and he placed the syringe into that crack at the bottom of Umar and Samira's door, and he pushed the plunger of the syringe before pulling the syringe out, quickly turning and disappearing down the stairs. And so
I tell you what, if I see him after doing what he did, it's on site. I don't want to hear nothing. There's nothing you got to say. Don't calm me down. Don't touch me. If I see you in person, the next time I see you, that second I see you, it's on site. And Toby behind me is going to come with me so he can get some of this work too. Pause.
Umar and Samira and their baby rushed to the hospital after discovering this video, and after calling 911 to tell police what they saw on this video, the police rushed to Umar and Samira's apartment complex. Not to go to Umar and Samira's apartment though, instead to go to the apartment right below Umar and Samira. The man who rented that apartment right below them was a 36-year-old named Zuming Lee. He was a married father of two who was working on his PhD in chemistry from the University of South Florida. And Umar and Samira thought of him as being a really nice guy. You know, he was very quiet, he kept to himself. He even gave them a gift after their daughter was born. But on this evening, when the police arrived at Zuming's apartment and knocked on the door, when Zuming opened it up, he was immediately arrested. It would turn out, despite Zhu Ming giving Umar and Samira that gift after their baby was born, well, that was the end of him liking Umar and Samira. Because as soon as they came home with their baby, Zhu Ming became obsessed with how noisy their baby was. Even if their baby was barely being loud, it completely consumed Zhu Ming's mind. It was like he was obsessed with listening for this baby. And then suddenly it wasn't just the baby that annoyed him, it was even the slightest noise he heard above him coming from Umar and...
My guy, you're in an apartment. You are in an apartment. You are in an apartment. You don't have your own space, really. Do you not know how apartments work? You got neighbors all around you. I don't like...
Samira's apartment that totally sent him into a rage. And so Zhu Ming began constantly going to the homeowners association to complain about the baby and, you know, the toilet sounds and the footsteps he was hearing.
Not the toilet sounds. Not the toilet sound. That guy, get a house. You know what? Just like, man. God.
And when that wasn't enough, he began going to the police about it. Now, Umar and Samira had been told that their downstairs neighbor really was upset with how loud they were being, and so they did everything they could to be quiet. They felt so bad that they were coming off as being these very loud and disrespectful people, which they were not. I mean, they did have a little baby, and babies make noise, but I mean, they were doing everything they could to be quiet. And so they had no idea that Zhu Ming was still just completely furious at them. And eventually, Zhu Ming's fury just became completely unhinged, and he used his chemistry know-how, because remember, he's...
You know what I think? I think something happened to him personally, and he just wanted anything, like the slightest, I don't know how to say, like, he had some personal shit going on. Something happened to him, or something was currently going on with him at the time. Something. I just like, you live in an apartment. Like, what the, like, bro, what? You can't live in an apartment and expect it to be quiet. Stupid quiet. dumb quiet. Like space quiet. You can't do that. Oh my God.
Studying for his PhD in chemistry to begin putting together this deadly mixture of chemicals that contained things like methadone and hydrocodone, and he put them into a syringe and he began injecting them into Umar and Samira's apartment to poison them to make them be quiet. And so by the time Zhu Ming was arrested, he had been injecting these deadly chemicals into their apartment for a month. That was obviously the cause of all of Umar and Samira and their baby's symptoms. It was this poison. Umar, Samira, and their baby would get treatment and they would fully recover from their poisoning. But very likely, had they not been quick thinkers and put that camera in place and caught Zhu Ming in the act, it's entirely possible that over time, the poison that was being injected into their apartment would have killed them. Officials are still investigating this case as it's still relatively new. However, the legal process was paused when Zhu Ming was deported back to China. Zhu Ming has not been convicted of any crime, and the criminal case remains open. And if Zhu Ming ever were to step foot on U.S. soil, he would be arrested immediately.
Are you serious? China got
Okay, here is the clip from our newest episode of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. Enjoy. One day in 2009, a high school janitor was mopping the hallway in between classes when he heard a heavy scraping sound. The janitor looked up and he saw a student slowly walking towards him. The boy's grotesquely swollen right leg dragged along the floor, and he walked with a dramatic limp. The janitor smiled and waved at the boy as he approached. After all, this boy was a familiar sight. It took him so long to get between classes, he would have to leave 10 minutes early just to make it to his next one barely on time. And so the janitor saw him going through this routine all the time. Just then, the bell rang, and more students streamed into the hallway. They jostled past the limping student, knocking him off balance, as a few kids snickered at the boy. For 3 years, the janitor had seen this happen every single day. He wanted to yell at the kids to stop being bullies, but he knew that would only make things worse. So instead, he gave the young man a reassuring pat on the back as he hobbled by, and the janitor just hoped that whatever was wrong with this boy would clear up soon. So that's the end of today's medical mystery story. If stories like this one appeal to you, remember we have an entire show dedicated to stories just like this one. It's called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries, and it's available on all podcast platforms for free. But you can listen to episodes early and ad-free on Amazon Music. So that's going to do it. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, see ya.
I'm just mad because he just ran away. God damn. You know what they should have did? They should have, like the authorities should have notified the authorities in China and was like, he did such and like he did all this, right? He did all this harm to this family for a month, and he's on video. He fled the country. He went to China. They should show the China authorities, notify what he did, show the video, and how long he's been doing it. And then China should have did something when he got to China. There's no way in hell he should have been, like, something should have happened to him. Hell no. That's crazy. They should have the American authorities should have let the China authorities let them know what's up, what old dude did. And then he should have got prosecuted in China. Ain't no way he a free man after this. I probably would have got a flight to China. But it's billions of them motherfuckers. I probably spent half my life trying to look for him. I probably would have went to China my damn self and tried to look for him, and it would have been on site. Like, that's crazy. Hell no. Keep it cool. I also checked out, I haven't reacted to them yet, but I also checked out Wartime's YouTube channel, and their videos is not that long, so thank you. reactions for them for Wartime channel. Wartimes is coming soon. I got you. Keep it cool, keep it classy, and I love you. Stay happy. My family.